It's Liliana and I'm back with my second process video, Sense of Calm, if you've noticed the play on words. And I'm just pulling out some of the products that I'll be likely to use on this new layout, some of which you may recognise from my last process video, but in addition I've also popped in a bit of kind of lavender tones to tie in with the theme. And so this is the background paper that I select, Pops of O2, and I really like the chevron on the back, so I'm going to cut that out and use that on another layout, since I know I'm only going to be using the very edge of this background, and I'm placing it on quite an old thin paper just for a bit of stability, even though it won't show in the final layout. And I pick out some coordinations cardstock in the colour I like, which I'm going to rough the edges up of for some added interest. I quite like that distressed look. And so now just speeding through the sanding process before I finally adhere that to the background with my trusty ATG. And again pulling up the edges to give it a bit more dimension, which I rather like. And so here is the picture of my younger son Elias, who's 3.5, and we're having a post-tantrum cuddle here in the lavender fields, where of course he's calmed right down thanks to the lovely scent of lavender, I think. Or to be honest, probably his brother's kind words. Anyway, here I am, just distressing some more of the edges of the layers, and I kind of regret that I'm about to crumple this photo mat, which affects the photograph on top of it. It also crumples it. But then, you know, sometimes life's not perfect. It has its little crumply moments, doesn't it? And in the end, I don't really worry myself about that. I think it looks okay. It's just that if I were to do that again, I probably wouldn't crumple the photo mat. So I'm obviously trying to smooth it back out again before I choose some more layers to select as a background to that picture. And I'm thinking about that Heidi swap. I do use that in the end for something else, but here I am with the Knitwit collection, the Sandcastles collection pack I think it was, and I'm just going to cut that round, and I'll pick another piece of that same collection to layer that onto in just a second, not before distressing it with some Faded Jeans Distress ink, and on the very outside of the whole layout as well, of course. Now that lovely material, that sheer purple, is from our wedding, and we used that for our favours bags, and I haven't used anything of it since, so I figured it's about time I used it on a layout. And the doily, of course, as you saw right at the beginning, I've pre-inked that with a couple of spray mists just to get it the right shade of purple that I could be happy with. It was I'd never intended to use it as a pink anyway, but I really like the shade it's come out with. And I'm trying to work in that special material as well as that doily. And then the camera cuts out where I've actually gone ahead and done a punch around the page with a Martha Stewart punch using these particular punches on the Heidi swap paper. But actually I've made a bit of a hash of it, and the top left corner doesn't really match up particularly well. Nevertheless, I'm going to carry on with that because I know that I'll cover that some clever way, I hope, which turns out to be with the way I do the title. And then I know that I've got that as the background, that I can still work on that photo layering to make that look just how I want it to look, with the doily, with the piece of material, what have you. But I forgot to include it, so I've had to rip that back up, try and just squeeze that in there, and that's fine. And then I work and work and work on that white doily, and I just decide it doesn't fit, despite my attempts to make it look okay. I'm not happy with it, but I do like that purple one I worked on earlier, and I just find a little gap for that as well in all that layering. But I do actually want to use that white doily, so in a kind of determined fashion I'm going to be spraying that and just putting a slight bit in that bottom left cluster, even just if it's just a reminder to myself that I try to get it in there somehow. And so now I'm working on that special fabric again to make some embellishments, and without thinking about it too hard, I just want to make a quick bow, and oh, there I go with the doily. And something in the bottom right as well. I just kind of ended up crumpling it all up and painting it with some cheap nail varnish I got from the pound shop. And now I'm working on the title, The Sense of Calm, and the sense bit is going to end up to be a banner, and I want to use a gold background for that, but I find the gold a bit too stark on its own as a contrast, so I just want to mute it with some alcohol inks, and I've picked out eggplant and slate. I did have a little go with the white, I think it's the picket fence opaque alcohol ink, and I'm thinking that that's not quite right, so I tried diluting it with the ink thinner, and actually it lifts up the gold from the base, and I definitely didn't want that to happen because I do like the gold. So I'm just going to work it in the central panel of that gold, as you'll see in a second. And I'll just end up using that on another project, that part on the right there. So this is the bit I will eventually use as the mat for the banner, and the word sense is cut out from a freebie font from some magazine years gone by, so I'm glad to be finally using that as well, actually. And so here I go, sticking it down with my wet glue until I eventually cut it into the right shapes, as you'll see in just a moment. And where I'll end up positioning this on the layout is going to be to cover up the punch around the page corner that I wasn't really happy with. So although I could have left it as a straight banner, which I was hoping to do, I've kind of split the word. So whereas you can see it says sense there, and you can probably get an appreciation for the play on words and the spelling being different, actually I've split the word up in the final layout. But c'est la vie, that kind of happens sometimes. It's not perfect, but I quite like the way the banner looks. I didn't mind that in the end at all. Snip, 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 snip. And off camera, straight after this, I'm going to be putting some adhesive foam on the back just to lift the banner a little bit from the layout. But you won't see me do that because the camera keeps cutting out. It either gets too hot or runs out of memory card. I'm going to have to try and perfect this whole process video making business. But anyway, here you see me trying to position it to where I'm happy with it. And of course there is now magically a cork frame in the bottom. That's a freckled fawn frame with a nice little quote on it. And I will be incorporating a bit more cork into the banner as well, although that all happens off camera because the camera cut out at the end. But you'll see it in the stills where there's a couple of cork dots just to kind of tie it all up. And similarly now I am trying to bring a bit of the alcohol inked gold into other parts of the layout, and right now I'm working on the tree. I could have just dabbed a bit of alcohol ink around the original gold leafy part of the tree, but I've made harder work for myself by cutting into the pre-existing stamped up alcohol ink gold card. For whatever reason I decided to do it that way around. I can't really always work out my own logic. Anyway, this is the part where I'm just sticking down the banner, committing that to the page, and of course I've covered up that problematic punched out corner, and now I'm just putting a bit of string and tying up some bows to make it all look strung up on the top there. And a bit of that string I'll just swirl in behind the tree to bring a bit of continuity across the page to the bottom left corner. in a second. Good old tacky glue getting the string stuck down and secured. And finally, alcohol ink on some rather ugly peel-offs, but I do like to challenge myself and get my stash used. So here it is, I'm slotting that into that cluster there and over to the other side as well. And in the close-ups you'll see that I've also added a few dots here and there, as well as painting the edges of that doily with some of that cheap gold nail varnish. Well, that's my layout, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed it. Bye bye.